All right, we're back again here. This is What's the Sweet. I'm your host, Jonathan. With me today, we've only got Jonathan Jr. and Banderson. I don't get why man was doing thumbs up.
Sitting high, innit?
All right, so this week's question is, over the years, are NFL players becoming better athletes? What do you lot think?
Are you saying like NFL players in their careers become better athletes or like?
No,
Like,
so
in
since the
general,
start of the NFL, to
Yeah.
now,
Since the start, like 1912 or whenever it
I
started.
think it was 1896, if I remember.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, 100%.
If you watch the highlights, it's like funny.
Yeah.
But how do you know from watching the highlights that it's just not, that
Yeah,
person was just really bad athlete, or it was the camera angles, or just the fact that they can't even record properly in black and white?
Nah, I feel like the thing is like back then the sport was just like beginning, so like they didn't have the knowledge we have now. Where now like you have trainers, you have coaches, like you're working this, you're working that like several times a week. I feel like back then like they just played to play, like they just played. Like
And also like,
Myself just be a banter.
yeah, like
like,
Van was saying,
like-
like the type of things, even the helmets they didn't really have proper helmets till like recently, like couple years, like not couple years, but a few years ago.
So you're saying the equipment is helping them become better athletes?
Yeah, that as well.
Because I don't know if you lot know, but when American football just first started, there was an average of about, I think, 5 deaths a year.
Yeah.
you.
And like they never passed the ball, it was just all run.
Yeah, so I feel like now, like I was saying earlier, like back then, like you didn't have a trainer and they wouldn't be like, oh, you should work on this, you should work on that. Like, oh, today we're gonna train, I don't know, maybe agility. Like they didn't have none of that. Like I said, like they just played, like it was just running, they just ran around, tackled each other. But then now, like, did they even have a combine back then?
No, because there wasn't like an NFL like there was now. So NFL started in like 1950 something. But they had like all sorts of leagues going on back there. Like they had like AAA and things like that.
Yeah, so I feel like you could say that for most sports that like over the years, like the players, it's not like okay, a player from like back then, they could have the same athletic ability as like a player from now, but like a player from now, like they're working on specific things every day, every week. Whereas a player from like back then, they didn't have the opportunity to like work on those things. Like that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I think also like as Vanda was saying, like the trainers and stuff. I think the type of exercise they're doing and for what people they're doing has changed a lot. Because I think back in the day it was all about getting big. I think everyone who went to the gym they would just do weights and just get bigger and bigger and bigger. I think now when you go to the gym, you can work on like specific things to help you as an athlete. Like you can't tell me a lineman's gonna do the same workout as a wide receiver.
We'll get back to workouts and like getting big and stuff in a bit. But so just to give you lot, some background, the definition of athlete is a person who is proficient in sports and other forms of physical exercise. So are you saying the guys back in the day weren't?
No, they were. But if you're talking like athletic ability wise, like now there's a lot more exercises, workouts, trainings, and things like that. Like that's what I mean about like specific training. Because like back then, let's say they probably would train like certain workouts, but now you could have a trainer and be like, okay, I wanna get faster. Like the trainer can help you get faster. But like back then, I don't think it was like as efficient as like now. Because like obviously like there's like technology, there's YouTube videos you can watch, there's like online training, there's like everything. You could basically like access everything.
So the fastest 40 by a lineman, I showed Vanderson this earlier, was a 4.71 by Teron Armstead. So you're saying with the injection of money into the sport, so where you're able to get trainers, better facilities and that kind of thing, are you saying that's raising the level of the athletic ability of all of these guys?
Yeah, because like the guys back then, like they could be naturally just the same way that some people are naturally athletic. Like the guys back then could also be naturally athletic. But like if you take someone that's like naturally athletic and teach them like technique, power, like everything, like there's no like hesitation that they're not gonna get faster or like improve. Like
Yeah, I think yeah, like also when you're like, I mean, probably some of them were athletic to maybe compared to how athletes are now, but I think they didn't have the, if I understand that, the capability to really show off their athleticism and like, to even have like trainees to like help them show off like who they could be, like could they actually like the maximum strength of their athletic ability.
like now, if someone runs like a 4.3, 4.2, it's like all over the internet. Like if you ran that back then, it's just like well done. Like yeah, that's it.
Bo Jackson's rumored to run like a 4.1.
Yeah, and even like people didn't really like react to that too much. Like if a player was to run a 4.1 like this combine, like he like the whole world would know him. Like if he was to run a 4.1 now.
All right, let's talk money. So the first pro in American football was a guy called Pudge Heffelfinger. Good name, if you ask me. And he used to play for Yale, but he used to play as an amateur. So November 12th of 1892, he was paid $500, to go play for, I think it's Pittsburgh. I don't even know how to pronounce this. Allegheny, I think it's pronounced, which is the equivalent of about £14,000. And he was a guard. Do you think, so obviously they had like a little bit of money, but not really much. So do you think these guys were doing like their own workouts and whatever, but because they didn't have, like PTs or nutritionists or dietitians, that they weren't able to get to that peak level?
Yeah. Because these teams, like they're full of dietitians, PTs, like just people that will get you right, like physically, like athletic wise. And then back then, like they didn't have as much money. Like the league probably didn't have as much exposure. And like back then, like they had nobody to like tell them like, oh, you should be eating this, you should be eating that, and you should be doing these specific workouts. But like now, like almost anyone could get a PT and a dietitian. Like literally. Like I think back then it wasn't as common as like now.
No, I think back then they didn't really treat it like, if he was part of the team, I don't think they really treated it like, oh yeah, now I'm in the NFL, I have to take care of my body, I have to really watch what I'm eating. I think they just like played and they just kept it quite casual. Like they didn't really think about it too much. I think they just like none of the really trainees and stuff, like they didn't really do, I don't think they did like self-training either. I think they just played and just went home and yeah.
So I read about him. I think the first game he played in, they won 4-0. Then I think the next game they hired another guy. It's 4-0, but I don't think the scores were like 6 points for a TD. I don't want to read that much. I'm not gonna lie. It was very long. I think it was the game afterwards. They hired another guy. I can't remember what his name was, for $250, which would probably have been, that's almost half. So it would have been around maybe like $5,000. Lost the game 8-0. So that man would do a mad thing. But so the reason why I mentioned Heffelfinger was his weight at guard. That was his starting position. Was 88 kg. Yeah.
What?
I'm bigger than
that. And he was a starter, first ever player to get money out of American football. So just think of the weight difference from then to now.
What? That's crazy.
But so part of the reason why I mentioned Heffelfinger is obviously not because of, we'll talk about his weight and whatever later on, but obviously 14K is not that crazy. It's not, if you have like a wife and kids, even just by yourself, you're not really going to be able to do a lot with that. So a lot of these guys,
it's Is that
Yeah.
14K a month, a year?
Yeah. So a lot of these guys had
God.
a lot of these guys had a second job. So saying that, do you think because they're not able to dedicate as much of their life to, just focus on American football, that kind of thing, that kind of took away from their potential?
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I was saying like how much they're paid because I know I was reading something like most of them didn't really they had like second jobs, and I think they took it more like it's just a regular, just kind of enjoyment. And if they're getting paid, they're getting paid for it. And they didn't really pay them that much, so they didn't really look at it like that. They didn't say, "Oh yeah, I'm in the NFL, I'm getting paid this and that. I'm just gonna start up buy a new house or something like that." They were just like, "Oh, this is just like another job I can just do." So that's why I don't think they took it as serious as doing like training and stuff like that, take care of the body like they do now.
Yeah.
So saying that, hold on.
Like,
Wait, 1 second. Saying that, so these guys weren't able to take it serious, but still played, all out. Do they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame as much as like players of today?
I feel like that question is like from all the way back then. We don't have that much footage, and like the footage that we have, like the camera angle, like the quality, like it's not great. So then, like considering that footage, you can't really be like, oh, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame because he played in an era where like he had to have 2 jobs. Yeah, there was more dedication, stuff like that. So I feel like it's like hard to judge when now you could just look at a football player that actually has good film and be like, oh, like these highlights are crazy. Like, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. So I feel like that's the case.
So the stats don't matter. They would have recorded the stats.
I mean, if their stats are like, if they put up like crazy numbers, then yeah, they do deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. But then if you have a guy that you only hear stories about him, like, oh, he did this, he did that, like you only hear stories, then like you can't go off by like stories.
But I mean, like, if you're in the Hall of Fame, then you're in the Hall of Fame. Like, I guess put respect on the Hall of Fame, but I still think like they had to. It's a bit different because they were more judged by people who were there, and they didn't really have film like Vandy was saying.
So part of the reason why I've mentioned the weight, especially for Heffelfinger, was before 1950s, the NFL had a limit on substitutions. So you're only allowed, similar to like traditional soccer, you're only allowed to have a certain amount of numbers going in and out. So a lot of these guys used to play more than one position. So you would have, let's say, like a linebacker playing running back or a guard that could play D end. So if he was really big to play guard, he wouldn't be as like nimble as well to play D end. As well as up until the 1970s, there was no cut blocking, so you couldn't hit like a lineman's knee. So linemen didn't really have to work on their legs as much as they would the upper body. So they were very top heavy. That's the right term. So saying that, do you think the rules of the NFL limited them in terms of athleticism? I don't know if I said that right.
I think the rules just like, if you're playing by the rules and like if you're saying you don't have to, there's no cock blocking, so like they won't hit your feet. So you don't really have to work on your feet because they're not really going to be used as much. And then they implement that, then you have to start working on your feet, then it's a bit different. But I think if they played to what the rules were and they did well, then they were good athletes to what I'm into.
Yeah, I also feel like the way that like you said, there's certain rules, there's like certain ways the game's played and it's evolving. Like for example, back then, if you saw like a linebacker run like a 4.6, 4.5, 4.4, like it would be like insane. But like nowadays, like linebackers are running that like it's nothing. So like for example, the offensive player, like it's more demanding that you're quicker, that you can like beat the quick linebackers and D linemen because like every year that's going by, it's like the faster they're getting. So yeah.
So if you're saying all of that, yeah. How do you fairly compare, people who had other limitations to now? So So obviously, like I said, they had those rules where they're playing more than one position. Where now you can play one position and I can substitute as many people as I want. All I have to have is a limitation on my roster. How do you fairly compare both of those those NFL players?
Wait, one question. In the NFL, you can't play both sides, right?
You can, but it's not really like a big thing. Everyone stops it from like college. So like Miles Jack used to play. Main position was linebacker. I think he used to play at LSU if I remember correctly, and then played running back as well for them, and he was pretty good at both. But when you get to NFL, they basically just have you specialize unless you're like.
It's not illegal. You can do it. They just don't.
Yeah. Plus, obviously, you have to have specific numbers for specific positions and so on. So it gets really long having to, make more than one jersey and that kind of thing.
Mm. But
what was the question you asked?
Yeah, I knew you were going to do that. So knowing the real differences, between now and like 1950s/70s, with those two rules, how do you fairly judge those athletes compared to now? Sorry.
The rules.
Because now players are only playing one position, so they can specialize their body to fit that. While before, like I said, you have players are playing more than one. They could play in up to, I don't know, 3, 4, depending on what their team needed them for.
Yeah, but I think like if you're an athlete, you can do both. Even now, like if you're a pure athlete, like you can do both sides of the ball. Like you can play defense, you know what you're doing, you know how to tackle. Where you can go on offense, maybe you can catch. Like you know how to run fast. Like you know what you're doing. Like you're a proper athlete. But like if you're saying that they just had to play both sides of the ball, but maybe they weren't as good on both sides. Maybe they only were good at, I don't know, blocking, but they weren't really good at the end. Then is that really like a proper athlete? You know what I'm saying?
I feel like now, like for example, like you said back then, I forgot his name. He played O-line, but then he also played on defense. So I feel like why he wasn't that big is because like if he was that big on defense, he wouldn't be able to like keep up and be like agile. So he basically had to adapt to both sides of the ball. But then now, like with the different rules and stuff, like the NFL, they try to make you specialize in one position. So like if you play O-lineman, you don't really have to worry about like, oh, I have to play D-line or I have to play like linebacker or something. So I'm gonna have to chase down the ball carrier. So you could just like build your body to the position you play.
Cool. Let me show you guys something. Yeah, I'm gonna show you a graph. So this is a graph of the average weight of NFL players over the years. So as you can see, the most dramatic is offensive line and D line. These other positions, they're kind of stable. They're all raised a little bit, but nothing crazy. So seeing that dramatic weight increase, can you say these guys are, better athletes than the guys from before?
I think so, yeah, because you see offensive linemen now and defensive linemen, they're much heavier now, but they are also much quicker and more, more quicker with their hands as well. You know what I'm just saying? Like the more just like the much, just quicker on their feet. But I think back then, even though they were much lighter, I don't think they would be as fast or as agile as they would be now.
Do you think that's down to the specialization of their position?
Yeah, because like
it was like nutrition. Because back then they probably weren't eating as much to be as big, and they also they worked other jobs too, so they probably didn't have the time to be working that, eating this many calories or that much. So I feel like that also plays a big factor because guys nowadays they have nutritionists. They're eating how much they need to eat, like they're getting all their macros in, and then they're having workouts and stuff. So then I feel like that.
Yeah. And like on the nutrition part, like back then, pardon me, they thought basically just eating meat is like really good for your muscles because it's meat. So like it was really good for you. So most of them basically just had meat diets and they didn't really know about nutritions or about salad or things that would actually help you. Or like things like that. So that I think that's
like
also
eat
why.
salad though.
Huh?
You're talking like eat salad.
I eat salads.
You
Nah,
liar,
bro.
bro.
And, like bodybuilders, and, like athletes, they used to drink a gallon of milk a day, like back then, because
Steve used to do that, and that's how Steve became a bodybuilder.
A gallon of milk a day.
Well, I don't think it was.
I don't
It was
like
the 2 liter thing or whatever it is, like the 6 pint thing, the medium size.
Mm, that's
Um,
mad.
but perfect that you talking about, you know, health and nutrition. So in 1994, the government did a study on linemen who die of heart disease. Let me start again. 1994, the 1994 government study found that NFL linemen die of heart disease at rates 52% higher than that of the general population and 3 times the rates of NFL non-linemen. So that could be linebackers, DBs, all that kind of thing. Further research in 2008 found that linemen suffer disproportionately from metabolic syndrome, which includes risk factors like obesity and high blood pressure. Does that sound like someone who's an athlete?
no.
So
Nah, I feel like now, like the way that not just linemen, but a lot of players, like when they wanna put on weight, like they just start eating anything, just like random things. Like it could be like
Yeah,
oil,
yeah, but
fat.
these are all NFL players. Like you said, they've got nutritionists, they've got dietitians. They're the ones that tell them, yeah, eat this, good for you. You can put on that good mass.
And
yeah,
this
but I
is-
think now we have more knowledge of like what is actually good for you to eat and what you're meant to eat. That's meant to help you grow mass or grow muscle or grow whatever or go down in mass or muscle. So back then, I don't know if they might have had nutrition, but
This study wasn't that long ago. It's only just over 10 years.
yeah, but just saying.
Yeah, I just feel like back then, like if you were to tell somebody to like bulk up, not back then, like even nowadays, like if you were to tell someone to bulk up, they probably think you mean just eat like pizzas and burgers all day, and then like you're just gonna get big. Like I feel like that's
Yeah,
like mistake.
that's basically that's what I'm thinking. That's what they did, and you can't tell me that.
Even with the trainers, I feel like the trainers told them to eat like specific things, but then they probably went like a bit overboard and then just ate a lot more than they should have, and then just caused them long-term health issues.
Do you think you would have heard about that back in, like, let's say the 1930s or something?
Nah, I don't think that would have happened. They were even though they probably like didn't have the nutritionists and stuff, like a lot more like processed food started to come out like recently, like the 1990s, 80s. So I feel like 1930s and stuff, like they still, even though they didn't have a nutritionist, they still didn't eat like as much of like processed foods and things like that.
So again, doesn't exactly sound like, you know, these guys now are as, you know, healthy and athletic as you would think they should be.
Yeah, but not everyone is keeping to the same diet. Like you can't tell me every single NFL player is keeping to a healthy diet and doesn't eat burgers and pizzas every day.
Did you see that shit
If
that
they want
lineman drank to gain like 70 pounds? Like that's so
Who?
unhealthy. That lineman, he drank like a banana, Gatorade, peanut butter,
Oh
scrambled.
yeah. At the
That's so-
combine.
like what? He wants to kill himself. Like how do you that's my point. Like bulking up, they probably get it confused. Like just consume everything and anything, and then you're just gonna get.
All right. So obviously now in the NFL, you only have to play one position. So you're only on, like, let's say offense, and maybe you might play a bit of special teams, whatever. Unlike before, where you don't come off the field, you're on there the whole time. So obviously your cardio back then was a lot more than what you would need now. Do you think that would you take that into consideration?
Yeah, they're like I feel like back then their bodies and they play a lot more, so like they have more endurance and things like that compared to like players today. Like if you were to expect a player to like play all game, like their bodies and like they're not used to it, so they probably wouldn't like look like they're at their best because they're probably gonna be tired, out of breath and stuff. So they were a lot more like endurant and they could play a full game on like all three sides, like special teams, defense, and offense, compared to like now.
I got a question. Which era would you say back then is stronger, or like now is stronger?
Now, by far, because like I said before, you can specialize in one position. You don't have to do cardio. Obviously, if you're doing like loads of cardio, you can also lose a bit of like muscle mass and that kind of thing, which will also affect your strength, that kind of thing. But this actually brings me to what the point I wanted to bring. So back then, linemen would have had 6-packs and that, innit? Outside of Aaron Donald, who now do you think on the line's got a 6-pack?
Myles Garrett.
I'll take him away as well, man. He's a ridiculous freak. He's like almost 300 pounds with complete 6-pack. So that's only 2 guys, yeah? How many NFL linemen are there? And that's the only 2 you could think of. The only other one would have probably been like Mario Williams and what's the other Dolphins guy with the Mohican, but I don't think he plays anymore. No, he wasn't. TJ Dolphins or the Bills.
The linebacker. No.
JJ, yeah. So there's like what, like JJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Aaron Donald, Mario Williams doesn't even play anymore, so he doesn't even really count.
DeMarcus Lawrence.
So you fought a 5-man. They're all on the D line. No one on the O line.
Now there is one O line, Brandon Brooks for the Eagles, but he lost mad weight. He lost like 50 pounds in the offseason.
So think of that. You're having to rattle your brain to think, oh, does this guy have a 6-pack? But back then, all of them probably had a 6-pack.
Kind of sus.
You got to flex on them, innit? So obviously, part of being an athlete is you want to look like an athlete as well. Do you think? I don't want to keep drawing out linemen, but it's not even like linemen, like linebackers or even running backs. They probably got bellies, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but like I've seen like more college players, they look better. Like they look more athletic. Like you see, like DNs now, like the more athletic. Like I was just on Instagram and I saw like a DN do a backflip. Like I would never think a DN would do a backflip, if you know what I'm saying. Or like linemen, they just. I mean, you probably get O-line doing backflips as well, but yeah, I just think they're evolving more. I don't think back then it was more about like weight and being bigger to stop them. You know what I'm saying?
So good thing you brought up college. In college, a lot of players play both ways. So like you might have a running back who also plays the end or something crazy.
Yeah.
So do you think in college you're a better athlete than you are in NFL?
I feel like in the NFL, like you said, you specialize to one position. So you're probably not using your athletic ability as much as you would. But like that doesn't like take away or like mean you're not as good of an athlete as you were in college. You're just not using it as much. Like you're sticking to one position and you're only doing what you need to do for that position.
Yeah, but because when you're in college, it really shows off that you can go both ways and really shows off that you're a proper athlete.
So obviously, I did some of the interviews on the Big Kid Big Kid Instagram channel, and we did one with NFL player Ifeanyi Moma, and he played wide receiver and tight end. But he said the time he was in his best shape was when he was in college, compared to he was in the NFL. So do you think the NFL was restricting their athletic ability, or do you think they're just trying to maximize them just to do certain things?
I think they're trying to maximize them to do certain things. Because like in college, like you're running a lot, you're doing a lot of like physical work. So you're probably burning a lot more calories. Like you're at your like prime. And in the NFL, like if they only want you to do one thing, like you're only gonna do one thing. Like you're not gonna be as active as like you were in college when you're playing both sides and things like that.
Yeah, I think in the NFL as well, you have to get familiar to. If you played both sides, you have to get more familiar to becoming one player in specialized position.
All right, I'm going to show you guys something else as well now. So this is obviously a chart showing 1995 to 2007. So it's not that far away. But reason why it goes up to 2007 because you don't want to include players who may still be in the league and whatever because they can mess up the results. So this shows the length of careers compared and like how many people were drafted. So there's about 300 people and it lasted 1 year. So they're saying about 300 people got up to about 7 years. There's only like under probably, let's say 20 that got to the top, which was 16 years. Do you think nowadays your NFL careers are lasting a shorter period than they were back in the day due to, people becoming better athletes and there's bigger contacts and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so. Like, there's more competition for you. Like, they'll like if you're not performing, you have because now you don't have any excuse. Because in college you could say, "Oh, I have to play running back and linebacker." It's confusing for me. But when you're in the NFL, you only have one position and you have to specialize in that position. And then if you don't specialize in it, and they find someone better than you, then they'll just cut you and sign someone else. Like, I think in the NFL, it's not that big of a deal for them to just drop you out. I mean, now to them drop you out and sign someone else.
Yeah, like Jonathan said, it's like a business at the end of the day. So if you're not performing, like your career isn't gonna last very long.
Cool. Let me show you. Let me show you another graph. So this is a similar thing, but it just shows your average years in the league. So from 95 to 2007. So 95, you're lasting about just under 5.5 years. To 2007, you're lasting just over 4.5. To now, where it's around 3.5 years. So you say because of the people becoming more athletic, it's also making the competition a lot more fierce, a lot more harder for people to keep their jobs in the NFL.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a direct correlation, or there's not other factors like because of like injuries or
it could be a lot of factors. I feel like from people being a lot more athletic, I feel like the game is a lot more fast paced. So like you're probably taking more hits, like you're getting chased down a lot quicker, like the guys are bigger. So there's like a greater risk of you like getting injured, even though you have protection, like you can still get injured.
Like now you have like 3 teams. Like you have the starter team, like backup, and then practice squad, and then reserves, like new signings, the people who didn't get drafted. So I think there's a lot of competition between who really, if you're performing and you're not performing.
So to round this up, do you guys think athletes now are better than the athletes from the heyday in the NFL?
I wouldn't say they're like better. I say they're just better trained. If that makes sense, they're just trained better.
But like athletes, because I was just thinking about the NBA as well. If you look at the NBA back then, it's so much different than it was now.
I think the average height was like 6'4" or like 6'3".
I don't know if you were even allowed to dunk back then.
They didn't even have a 3-point line.
Yeah.
And now the average height is like 6'8". So I feel like that does like what I said. Like I think it's better training and just like they're just like more
specializing.
Yeah. And
so the more money it's just you've been able to put in goes to a lot of stuff, which brings out potential for that position.
Yeah, I think with the money they really created what they wanted with NFL. Like they really created what they wanted as they wanted the NFL. If you get what I'm saying.
All right, cool. We're gonna end things here. Thank you guys for listening. I've been your host, Jonathan. With me again has been Jonathan Jr. and Banison. We'll see you in the next episode.